These are the underrated cards of Voyage to the Sunken City. These are cards that were rated poorly by the community and occasionally by myself, but in reality are being played in a lot of decks. And for instance, Gaia here behind us was rated at 2.9 stars by the community, which doesn't sound that terrible, but the community tends to rate sort of highly. They're biased upward a little bit. And what that means is Gaia was actually 96th of all cards. So there's 135 cards in the set. That puts Gaia in the bottom 40 cards. So basically in the bottom third of cards, right? And in reality, of course, as anyone knows who played Voyage to the Sunken City early, Gaia got played a ton in Mech Mage. And in fact, you'd see one Gaia, then you'd see two Gaias and three Gaias as they made more and more. Now, Mech Mage has definitely fallen off over the course of the Voyage to the Sunken City meta in different states. It's still kind of fringe playable, tier 3 status, I think, but certainly at its peak, Gaia was absolutely everywhere. That first week of the meta, people thought like Mecha Shark and Gaia were completely broken and insane. So definitely surpassed expectations, much better than the 96th best card of the expansion. I still don't think this card is insane right now. Really don't see it very often these days, but still not 96. You know, this is probably a top 40, top 50 card even now, and definitely peaked much, much higher. Now, I gave Gaia 4 stars. I thought Gaia had more potential. I mean, we've seen these like cards that can do face damage be better than just big dumps of stuff. And this is kind of both of those. You both get a lot of minions, you get reactivity, and you get some face damage extra, which usually that puts cards over the hump if they're not quite there otherwise. So I liked this one okay. The face damage lined up for me. Still seems like an interesting card. Now, it may be one that never really gets played again because we may not get more mech support. You know, Mage may have gotten all their mech stuff and never get any more in its rotation. Maybe get like one or two few extra ones along the way, just kind of coincidentally. So may not really come back into popularity, but was still everywhere for a little while there. So much better than a 2.9 star card. I think we all have to agree. There are actually quite a few mechs on this list, as you'll see with our next card. It's not all mechs though, don't worry. They just happen to land here. We started at the least underrated, by the way, and we're going to the most underrated. So Gaia was the least underrated in this video. Security Automaton is the second to least underrated. Automaton was rated at 3.2 stars. That's good for 86th highest rated card, so notably in the bottom half, but actually reached 7th highest played. And just a reminder, played means it's percentage of decks it's included in, not like individual times it's played. So there's no bias here towards lower cost cards being played more often. That was a common question in the last video. This is percentage of decks it's in. So the reason for that is because it was in both Mech Mage and Mech Paladin, which were both very, very popular early in the Sunken City meta. This is another one that has fallen off a little, but still gets played in Mech Paladin even today. Automaton is not totally dead. It certainly sees more play than Gaia, and still in 5.5% of all decks, which is a pretty high mark, I have to say. Still quite reasonable because Mech Paladin is a fairly popular climbing deck, particularly lower on the ladder in lower ranks. I gave this one 3 stars. It has surpassed that for sure. It's a 4-star card, absolutely. Even for a moment there, you might have thought it was a 5-star card. I just didn't think it would scale fast enough. Like I thought the 3 health was too susceptible, but with things like Seafloor Gateway and Mage, like discounting that hand, this might be 6-7 health the same turn it gets played, which of course made it much harder to react to. And then with Paladin, you know, they just have so many things hitting the board right in a row that sometimes this one just slips through. So all in all, wasn't as, you know, easy to deal with as I expected, and the scaling made it a monster threat pretty dang quickly. I thought this one would just be slow, but I think in general in this list you're going to see a lot of like tribal minions, minion type cards that were underrated. I think maybe a lot of us didn't expect mechs or nagas to be actual deck drivers. I didn't think they would be the things that made decks good. I thought the card would have to have some sort of other utility that powered it outside of its minion type. But in reality, minion type decks did work there for a while. They're not quite as good now, though, as things get refined. What do you know? Another mech. This one is the Seafloor Savior. It was a 2.9 rating. That's, again, 96 highest, and got up to 14th at its peak with Mech Paladin's popularity. And, of course, still getting played a lot today. This is really, I think, one of the best cards in Mech Paladin. Looking real quickly, still in 5.3% of decks, peaked over 12% there, it looks like. And I think it's just really good mech because it passes on its stats to the next thing, which is a great combo. in particular with the 3-drop Asharan Mooncatcher and its sunken version can really help scale those stats up. But as soon as you start hand buffing this with any sort of Alliance Bannerman or Prismatic Jewel Kit buffs, you really start stacking these stats a ton. And that's why I like this card. I thought it had this hand buff utility on top of the mech utility. That's why I actually gave this one 4 stars, which I think it has probably hit that mark and remains, I think, one of the better cards for Mech Paladin, and even being played in hand buff Paladin outside of Mech Paladin. So pretty cool that it's getting dual utility. I entirely misread this card at first. Oh yeah, I think a lot of people did. Yeah, it's like a lot of people read it as set its stats to this minion's attack and health. In other words, the minion would always be a 2/2 as opposed to giving it the extra 2/2. A lot of people thought, like, why would I want to turn my Leviathan into a 2/2 as opposed to giving your Leviathan an extra 2/2? Yeah, that probably contributed a little bit to the underrating, perhaps. People who didn't read it right, or it is a little confusing. I get it. I don't want to blame the reader there, but that might have been a part of it. All right, next up is Dozing Kelp Keeper. This one was rated at 3.2, which was 86th highest. But in reality, was the 5th highest played card for a while there. If you remember, Druid was really good. And Dozing Kelp Keeper was a really big part of that deck back before we saw the nerf to Miracle Growth, big spell Druid stuff, or I just call it Ramp Druid really because it didn't have Hedra, was everywhere and totally insane. And I thought this card was a possible nerf target, actually, as some of you may recall. It ended up that Miracle Growth got nerfed instead, which that was fine too. But Kelp Keeper was absolutely crazy tempo, kind of a swing card once they got to Nourish and such. And if we see, it actually peaked at 22% back in the early Sunken City meta. So completely crazy popularity there. Nutty. 22% of decks are playing this, right? And that's basically every Druid deck, like 100% of Druid decks. So I liked this card. I don't know. I thought it made a lot of sense to me. I'm not, oh my God, I'm spoiling everything. It made a lot of sense to me. I gave it 4 stars. I'm actually not totally sure why people slept on this one a little bit. It just looked like a very efficient play to me. Druid is easy to get to 5 mana worth of spells. Perhaps people thought it would just take a little bit too long, or maybe Druid wasn't going to be there. Kelp Keeper allowed Druid to have not as much of a downturn on 5. Yeah, exactly. Like, it helps shore up the downturns you take later with your big spells, with Nourish and stuff. Maybe people didn't know Nourish was going back to 5. If you remember, Nourish got like rebuffed. Next up here is Tuskar Trawler. I gotta be honest with you, I never noticed that this had 4 R's. I never noticed this had that pirate bonus there. Never noticed that in my life. Tuskar. I've never seen that in my life. I always just read it as Tuskar. I thought it just had like 2 R's, I guess. Anyway, he's been rated at 2.8, which was the 100th highest, but really peaked at 8th highest played because, of course, Quest Warrior. Pirate Warrior was everywhere for a while. Completely nuts Pirate Warrior stuff. And Tuskar fit in really nicely. Like, yes, even though he's just a 2/3, Dredge is a great keyword. It really helps you fill your curve, get good cards. And when it's a pirate, it doesn't really matter. You just try to play pirates. Cheap pirates are good. A fundamental part of one of the best decks in the game for a while there. I mean, depending on your rank, but Pirate Warrior was still very good. Now, that said, it does take that pirate synergy to make this card good, I think. He's very rarely seen out of that. He still played a little bit in Rogue, I think, on occasion. Well, it's actually Pirate Warriors are still running him. Some people are clinging on to Pirate Warrior and still playing him, but that's about it. Yeah, Dredge is an underrated keyword in general. I think that's a good perspective. Yeah, Dredge has been really good. I thought it was going to be mediocre at best, and it's been just really good. We've had a string of great keywords. Dredge, Tradable, they've all been pretty awesome. Honorable Kill, not so much, but I like Colossal and Dredge this expansion. They've both been good. All right, next up is Treasure Guard, and was rated at 2.7. I gave this one 2. Thought this was a stinker. In reality, 3rd highest played card. 3rd highest, because this was being played in Aggro Demon Hunter before Aggro Demon Hunter got nerfed. It was the best deck in the game, most popular deck in the game. This is insane. I want you to see this. This peaked at 49% of decks running this. That is like higher than Zilliax. Zilliax was like around 45 to 50% most of its life, as I recall. I mean, it shifted depending on meta and stuff, but this is crazy. 50% of decks were running Treasure Guard, dude. That is absolutely bonkers. Yeah, maybe we didn't anticipate the Drekthar side of it, because definitely it's one of the better 3 drops for Drekthar. that like just shutting down the board with 10 health sometimes off 2 of these. Well, 14 if you count Drekthar himself. That was insane. I'm losing my voice, by the way. Sorry. So like a 14 health dump that draws you 2 cards, that interrupts your opponent, which often was another aggro demon hunter. So you're slowing down their aggressive pushes as well. Like all of that fueled it really nicely. And then also just Naga synergies as well. If you need a Naga, need a speed bump card that cycles, this is a great fit. So it was one of those cards that it's like, it's not really great in any way. It doesn't have a high ceiling. There's nothing about this where you go, oh my God, this won me the game. It's so amazing. Occasionally, I guess if it was a perfectly timed taunt, it could, but you know, there's nothing about this design or effect that's like deck defining or game defining, but it has a high floor. It's never that bad. You know, it's always kind of just good. It never feels bad. And therefore it gets played a lot, especially I guess in sort of the 2 most popular Drekthar decks, which really loved it. No comparison to Silverback. Yeah. Poor Silverback, dude. All right, next up is a Sharan Sweeper. This was only given 2.3 stars. I gave it 2. I think I thought about giving this 1 star even, honestly. And that put it at 119th. We are very near the bottom. That's bottom 12 cards. Or no, 16 cards. Bottom 16 cards. It was in reality the 17th highest played because, again, Mech Mage was really popular for a while there. I still, again, don't think this card is amazing. It's, you know, kind of a tempo loss for value upside, which I didn't think would be good in a minion type deck like Mech Mage, where you wanted to play out a sort of aggressive minion based strategy. It didn't make sense to me because it's like, well, you're not going to want to give up that much tempo. This is going to feel like the most underwhelming card in Mech Mage. But I think in reality, it did a couple things. It helps you fill your hand for reloads because that deck didn't really usually get there on the first wave or 2 of threats. Mech Mage kind of had to play 3 or 4 threats along the way. And this gave you the reload to do that. It generated additional Gaias for you. It generated additional Mecha Sharks for you, which when you have a couple really key win condition mechs, getting extras of those goes a long way. It also just helped fill your hand sometimes for Seafloor Gateway discounts. So that you had a lot of mechs to fuel your automatons or Mecha Sharks. Once the gateway went off, if you had more mechs in hand, you were better off. So it kind of served more utility than I realized when you consider all those other pieces of the deck and how it works. Maybe we could have seen that deck wasn't a 1-push deck, that it was almost more of a mid-range deck that required setup, or in some ways a combo deck almost with Mecha Shark, creating those big pop-off turns with Mecha Shark. We would have probably believed in this card a little more, but I suspect people thought the same thing I did, where this felt like the sort of most underwhelming part of the Mech Mage package, and therefore gave it a bad score. But we could have alternatively thought, like, if Mech Mage is going to be good at all, then this will be run simply because it is a mech and they needed a certain critical mass of mechs. We might have said, like, look, if the deck's good, this is going to get there. So that might have been another way to get this one right. But nonetheless, certainly important for Mech Mage. Now, this is the number 1 card, guys. This is our final card. I think this might be the most underrated card ever in my videos, of any of these I've ever done. I'm not sure about that, but it feels like it. It's definitely up there. Boneglaive was rated 1.8 stars. Boneglaive was rated 1.8 stars, and that's good for 132nd, right? 132nd highest card. But in reality, it hit 9th. It was played in 26% of decks almost. If you remember the crazy Demon Hunter world, but this was actually like after the first nerf to Demon. I don't even remember when this is, but regardless, it was being played in Demon Hunters as a finisher for Naga Demon Hunters, as a way to get basically 10 damage for 5 mana, with the Dredge upside 2 helping to fix and fill your curve for the following turn. Now, I think it was sometimes just a 1-of. I don't think people were always playing 2 of this. I didn't play that deck a lot, so I don't remember exactly. But nonetheless, got played in the best deck in the game, which made it, you know, a top 10 card from the expansion, despite being rated a bottom 3 card. If you give something bottom 3 status, you expect it to never, ever be played, right? That is absolutely a dead, unplayable card at 1.8 stars, particularly for community ratings. That is so low. It's crazy low. In reality, actually made the cut in the best deck in the game, which is kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. Now, I thought this was like a, Arcanite Reaper Plus. I gave this one 3 stars, which is, for the record, still underrating it. Like, that wasn't a high enough score either. It's definitely been a 4-star card at least. I thought, hey, it's an Arcanite Reaper. Sometimes you just need those big damage pushes, and this did it. And the dredge was even more upside than I expected, probably. If I'd properly weighted dredge, I might have pumped this one to 4, but I don't know. I doubt it. I think I was pretty close to giving this 2, honestly. But yeah, Boneglaive, that's a difference of what, 123 spots? It was underrated by 123 spots. There's only 135 cards. So you almost couldn't get more different than this, right? It's about as big of a spread as you can possibly have. Yeah, dredge on it is super useful. Multi-strike with it, super useful. Yeah, the supporting packages definitely help prop this one up, made it even better. Being able to push through a big taunt and still hit for a monster amount using both of the charges of this immediately can go a long way. Yeah, but now that said, it has totally fallen off after the nerf, right? Like it has collapsed. It's basically under 1% played now. So Demon Hunter has reshaped itself into a deck that stretches a little bit further. They're not looking for that like final burst off the Boneglaive. They're now playing things like Z-Log and Karya to stretch the game into more threats. Not quite getting there on that initial wave. So Boneglaive doesn't become as efficient of a finisher suddenly. And therefore, you know, they need to stretch a little more minion pressure out. So Boneglaive has fallen. It may come back if the deck gets faster and more efficient over future metas. I wouldn't be surprised if this one makes a reappearance. As the deck gets faster and becomes more lethal, which often happens as we get further into metas, as things get more synergistic and more aggressive, Boneglaive could reappear. I wouldn't be totally shocked if something more efficient doesn't get printed in the meantime. Demon Hunter may get a better weapon that's a better finisher with additional utility. So wouldn't give up on this one actually yet, even though it peaked and it's fallen. Might peak again. But I didn't talk about Phelan. He was supposed to be he was supposed to be the least. Did I start on Gaia? I did. Oh my god, I skipped Phelan. Yeah, Phelan was in here. I didn't talk about this one. Circle back. He's actually the least underrated of all these, but Phelan was rated 3.1, and that's, you know, 90th basically, and actually almost made the top 25. Phelan's been playable. People toss Phelan into a lot of different decks. Turns out having a bunch of extra Colossals to dredge into is really not so bad. He's not usually in the most optimized, most powerful meta decks, but still makes an appearance in a lot of like middling tier stuff, which I think earns an underrated status. People are looking for excuses to play this. Pretty cool that these like kind of fun neutral legendaries are actually getting some semi-legitimate competitive play. I think that's really cool. Anyway, that's it, guys. Those are the most underrated cards of Voyage of the Sunken City. Pretty cool. I like reviewing these and like seeing where we got things wrong and why we maybe misinterpreted some of these. And thanks for your help, guys. As always, appreciate you chiming in with some good chat.